Alright, so this is a trial run of some four-player breakdown slash analysis. Just gonna start with the context of this. This is the first R16 matchup of the 2017 Virginia meetup. Features participants of Jimbo Barrett is player 1, Beck Abney is player 2, Drew Weatherton is player 3, and Dan Burbank as player 4. Just going to do maybe one or two tracks. I haven't really done notes on anything else, so just not going to be the complete round. Just going to be LR for sure, and maybe Moo Farm, see how it goes. So, all right. Without any further ado, let's see what. Let's take a look at this. So, one thing to note, just real quick, is this round is being played on a ROM hack, which is being played with the EverDrive 64. So it's being played on the original N64 hardware with a flash cart, and the ROM hack is a tournament edition. So all of the players, all of the characters have the same stats. Basically, all have Yoshi's stats. Yoshi, Peach, and Toad being the optimal choices. Toad with a slight weight difference that's pretty much negligible in 4-player. But essentially every character has the same stats. So you see Jimbo driving as DK and Drew driving as Wario. They basically have lightweight stats. So everything's on an even playing field. And also there's some built-in scoring features and other things that kind of make playing a 4-player tournament just a little bit easier, like quality of life improvements type stuff. So, yep. So anyway, just gonna draw your attention to bottom left. Drew, he's gonna start off hitting this bomb, and that's kind of gonna sum up more or less how his round's gonna go in general. What's interesting here is now to look at Dan. So Dan actually has he has a mushroom right here, and he just has a single mushroom. So generally mushrooms and speed items are used to cut through the grass on the left. He has a single mushroom. Generally, you can't really cut the entire grass with a single mushroom. You need 3 or a golden shroom or star. So he has a single, and he has Beck, right? He's in 3rd place. Beck in front of him is 2nd place with a red. So Dan is going to, I think, make a slight mistake here. He's going to actually try to cut through the grass with a single shroom. In the meantime, getting out ahead of Beck, and not passing Jimbo, so he's actually going to go ahead and actually get, place himself in the line of fire of Beck's red. So, and he goes for the mystery boost there, which is interesting. He didn't get it, but I don't know if he got it or not. But actually not sure it matters. I think the correct play there actually would be to just hold that shroom and kind of wait for the next set of items and let Beck target Jimbo with the red, clear out his blocker or something like that. Anyway, so you'll see Beck fires the shroom off, the shell off, hits Dan. Okay, so now let's see. Okay, yeah, so pretty much nothing too crazy here. Beck gets some shrooms. Dan gets some reds in 3rd. And so from here, actually, Beck, so this is the typical shroom usage where you get 3 mushrooms at a minimum, like a gold shroom or star would work too, cut through the grass. And so Beck actually has a decision here. He can decide to either get the last set of items before the end of the lap, or he can just cut. That loses a little bit of time because you're going out out wide and not cutting as much grass, or he could just try to cut as hard as he can with the shrooms, cut as much grass off as possible, and get out to a little bit more of a lead. So he decides to skip the items and just go for the front run. So, and actually from this point on, spoiler alert, like he basically just front runs the entire time from here. So let's just take a step back. Beck actually is more or less like a non-factor, like the rest of the race. He just front runs the entire rest of the race. and second, Jimbo, Drew, and Dan just essentially beat each other up. So you'll see here, Dan's in fourth with trip reds. Drew's getting a third place item, and he's about to get a bolt right here. So he gets a bolt, and so he has Dan behind him with trip reds, and about to get another item. I think Dan got the items here. So generally, with the idea with reds behind and you have a bolt, it'd be if you can try to outrun them. So if you can get around, if you can fire the bolt and get around Jimbo, he can put some distance between himself and the reds. So I think that's what he does here. I don't know if he was just it was either that he was thinking about that correctly or he just spammed it. I'm not sure. Drew actually did. You've seen some other spamming of stuff from him coming up, so it's possible it was just a spam. But I'm going to give him credit here and just say it was a smart heads-up play. So he fires it there. Dan actually, to his credit, fires this red off before Drew passes Jim. So actually, this red's going to follow Drew, even though he passes Jim. So you can see here he's in third. He's about to move into second, but the red, when it was fired, it like locks onto the person who's in front when it's fired, and then it kind of ignores Jim as Drew passes him. So that was heads up by good play by Dan. Dan actually fires a second red, and it takes out Jim's blocker. What Dan could have done there, because Jimbo had another blocker behind, is he could have fired both of his reds very quickly, and actually would have not given Jimbo enough time to pull out the blocker. So Dan could have gotten a hit there on Jimbo, but he has other reds to follow up, and everyone's small at this point, so it's not that big of a deal. But actually, Drew actually gets into first here briefly. I did say Abney front ran for the most part, but I think there's going to be like a quick swap again here pretty soon. So yeah, actually, Drew got hit by, what did Drew get by? Let's see, I forgot. Oh, another red. Was that the second red from Dan? What happened there? Yeah, let's see. Where did that red come from? Maybe it was the second one from Dan? Maybe, I think it was. So actually, the second red that Dan fired off targeted Drew somehow, which I'm not entirely sure how that worked. Or was it from Beck? No, it was from... Still not 100% sure where that that red came from. Anyway, so we'll move on. So let's wait to be okay. So here we got a lot of stuff going on. So actually, let's take a step back here and walk through this. Dan has 3 reds here. He sees Drew in front of him get a boo, and he actually, so generally what happens when someone has a boo, when you're in 4th place, they're going to target your items because you have the best chance of getting good items. So when you have 3 reds, it generally there's like a race between good players, like the player with the boo and the player getting 4th place items, to try to if the 4th place person gets a bolt or star, the person with the boo is going to try to grab it. If you have 3 reds around you, there's no way you could possibly fire off all 3 reds and trigger your items to prevent the steal. So I think what Dan does here is kind of heads up. He actually fires off his 3 reds to... I mean, basically they're useless at that point, but he's essentially blocking Drew from stealing his item, which is heads up. So Jim also gets 3. The other thing, too, I guess generally, is when you have a boo and there's 3 reds come out behind you, it's almost always the right play to actually steal the reds, or try to steal the reds, because it's such a big penalty. The other thing here with Drew is that he basically, with his boo in his position, if he doesn't try to steal the reds successfully, even if he doesn't steal them successfully, he can at least be immune to the reds for a while. But essentially what Drew's doing here is, boos are only really that they're more effective the further up you are, so in 1st or 2nd place. 1st is the obviously ideal place, but if you're in 4th, a boo isn't as valuable because there's no 4th place items to steal. You have a boo, right? So and you're not getting other items. So you kind of have to be aware of if I have a boo, there's a limited window of when I can use it effectively. And by not using it here, Drew's kind of cutting himself off. He's like pinching himself essentially. Um, so he's basically, I think he's probably waiting to see what Dan gets. But for me, if I'm in second, especially on like LR, where lightning and bolts aren't as overpowered, whereas like compared to like a Wario Stadium or something, I think if I'm Drew in this position, I see the reds come out from Jim. I try to steal, or just make myself safe so I can get items coming up and not really. Well, yeah, you'll see. It doesn't work out well for Drew. So, Dan just heads up play by Dan, like getting rid of his reds. He gets more reds, pulls them out right away, and poor Drew just gets hammered here. He gets 2 from Jim, 1 from Dan, and now so now Drew is now in 4th place with a boo, and that's not a great place. So even though he made that mistake earlier, what he should have done, I think, was at this point just cut your losses. Just get rid of the boo and get 4th place items, and you're not that far behind on LR. You can come back, but he doesn't. He holds on to the boo. So now we see. Okay, so here's interesting. Just ignore Beck for now. He's like long gone. Jimbo and Dan are gonna have like an interesting encounter here. So you see Jimbo is in 2nd place and is coming up on these items. Dan's behind him with reds, and Dan's already fired off. He's already fired a red. So this red's gonna hit Jim, and he gets the item here, but what Jim's mistake here is basically he knows Dan's behind him. He knows he's not that far behind him. What he should be doing here is he should be waiting for Dan to pass. So just to take us one step back is. If it's not already apparent, the further the lower your place, so the better your items are. So 4th gets the best items in general, 3rd gets slightly worse items, but better than the 2nd player, etc. So the idea here is you want to try to, even though it's slightly random, it is random, but there's different pools of so here's an example. In like 2nd place, there's a 5% chance for a star. In third place, it's slightly higher. I think it's like 10, and then in 4th, it's higher than that. It's like 15 or 20. I don't remember the exact percentages, but basically, you want to if someone's going to pass you and you're going to get an item, you should let them pass you, then get the item. So Jim makes a mistake here. He kind of spams his item here, and triggers it while he's in 2nd. He gets trip reds, which isn't terrible, but it's still. I mean, he could have gotten a bolt or a star with a higher chance, and if he waited to trigger that item when he was in 3rd place. So Drew here again. He uses his boo, but too late. So there's this animation that happens where he can't now collect these 4th place items. He stole Beck's single banana, and he's gonna have to sit these items out and drive in 4th place for a while with the single banana, which is not great. So let me catch up on my notes here. All right. So the other thing that just so to contrast Jim's play here, he while Jim fired early, Dan actually does a good job of getting. If you step it back here, so Dan actually gets his items off when he fires this here. He actually is he's in 3rd place right now, and he gets his items. So even though he got tripped shrooms, which isn't super great, it's actually pretty good on LR. But he made that play correctly. He fired he triggered the item before passing Jim, so he got a better overall chance of getting good items. So yeah, just a contrast of play there between Jimbo and Dan. And then Dan again, he's taking that shortcut through the grass with the shrooms. He actually has a similar decision to make that to what Beck had on the first lap. Beck, basically, when you have shrooms here, golden shroom doesn't apply because you can't get an item when you have a golden shroom. But he has a decision of whether or not to get these item blocks, or just take more of a cut through the grass. And so I think because he sees Jim with reds behind him, he thinks maybe he can pass Beck or something. But if it were me, I think I would probably go for the item blocks, just because Jim has reds behind, and that's a really long straight that the reds are pretty powerful on. So if it were me, you don't lose that much time going to the item blocks. You probably lose like half a second. But like to contrast that, like a red shell, you lose like 2.5 seconds per red shell. So if you get hit by multiple red shells, that's multiple second time loss versus going for some blockers or something else, maybe even a star, which you get in second place. I'd probably take the safer route, go for the items, lose the half second, not cutting through the grass as much. But yeah, so let's see what he does. Yeah, he skips the items here. Okay, so the other thing that was interesting here is that Jimbo actually like trolls Drew a little bit. He slows down right there, and I think maybe what he was trying to do is try to knock him over the items. Jimbo, I know, is very, that's a play he's made before, trying to knock people over items, slowing down on stuff like that. He's done that on, on the spiral on Bowser Castle, trying to get someone over the wall into the lava. So good play there, heads up play, and fires off that red after Dan. I don't think it's going to get to Dan in time. Wait, what happened? Oh yeah, Drew actually had a blue, I think, right? Oops, what did I do? Hold on. I think we're still good, I think. Okay. I have to back up. What did I do? Spamming too many hotkeys. Okay. Yeah, so Drew had a blue, fired it off. Let me check my notes here. All right. All right. Yeah, so nothing super eventful. Okay, so coming up here, there's another. So here's something where, okay, if you pause it here, Jimbo has Trip Shrooms in third place. Drew has a Lightning Bolt. And there's a couple. So Drew has a decision here to make. He's pretty far behind Beck at this point. I'm not entirely sure he could catch Beck, but he can catch second and third, I think. With the Bolt, so there's two options. So there's no one out in front of him with reds. It's just Jimbo with shrooms. And one of the things you can do with a Bolt is you can basically trap someone in the grass. Like Jim's committed it like into the grass at this point. And he's only fired off one. He's just used his first shroom. So if I'm Drew, I'm thinking what I do is I trap Jim here early, and I probably don't catch Dan before the tunnel. He's already around the turn, and then you get third place items in the tunnel. Or what I do is I just let Jim go, and I hold the bolt for the so I get fourth place items in the tunnel, and maybe double up on a fourth place item. What Drew does here is a little bit like in between. It's like non-committal, and so I think you have to choose one or the other. But it ends up working out for him. But I think it's like mostly lucky that it worked out for him. So we'll see what happens. Dan's gonna lay some bananas here. They're fairly nice. Oh, he hits the bomb. Okay, so the other thing that happened right there is Drew fires the bolt. Dan hits the bomb. Fast falls down. It actually ends up being lucky for Dan. Kind of neutralizes that bomb head a little bit. And actually, Drew fired that blue shell off earlier. And then he basically neutralizes his own blue, so Beck lucks out, because when you're in the spinning animation of that lightning bolt, the blue shell will basically cancel. So basically, I think it was inadvertently, obviously he wasn't trying to do that, but just kind of two good breaks for both Dan and Beck, and a bad break for Drew and Jim. So you see he like semi-traps Jim, but Jim actually, I think I don't know if this is intentional, but when you're smaller, you actually go faster when you're spinning out. I think Jim hopped there like immediately to trigger the spin out. I'm not sure. I saw him do that again when I was watching another race with him, so I wonder if that's something he's doing intentionally. But I don't know if I would do it here because you're on a turn, but anyway, what you'll see here, he has the shroom. When you're small, you can't use a shroom. So there's certain items that you can't use while you're small. Like you can't use a star, you can't use a boo, you can't use a shroom, like any kind of shroom. And so one of the strategies you can do with the lightning is you can fire it while someone has an item, and like that they can't use. It'll effectively block them. So Drew with his like semi trap, he actually I think luckily just out of coincidence actually got basically made it so that Jim couldn't reach the items here. Jim actually could have slowed down, I think, but with the timer there, it's probably not a great like. You have to know the timer and you have to know the feeling. It's kind of hard to like know. So anyway, he Drew slows down there actually, which I think is pretty smart. So he gets the fourth place items, even though he didn't like. I think he didn't like try to do that. It just worked out, and Jim actually just it was almost I think just a very lucky play. But let's see what's going on. So hold on a second. Can't ignore Dan. Yeah, that's pretty much it for Dan and Beck. Beck at this point is too far out for Dan's reds. You basically have line of sight on that brick wall on the left. So if Dan fired these shrooms, these reds, they would basically just hit the wall and they wouldn't reach Beck. If Beck had any kind of like if he's worried about those at all, what he could do here is he actually could dive into the grass and hug the wall, which kind of like maximizes that angle. So it'll even make it harder for those reds to actually reach home. The thing about like this game is that the Reds kind of have more line of sight, where the newer games like Mario Kart Wii and Mario Kart 8, you fire a red and basically just like homes around, like drive around the track like a character essentially, and then home in when it gets very close. But like this game, if Dan were to fire these Reds now, they would basically just beeline in the wall and just go away. So, but yeah, Beck's so far out here it really doesn't matter. So. We'll see here. Actually, let's see. Right window. Drew gets golden shrooms, which is okay. Bolt probably would have been slightly better. But so basically now we're in our finishing order at this point. So Drew's gonna make a run at Dan, but he's not gonna catch him. And Dan I think he just kind of fired the bolts. Fired the reds just kind of as like a. I don't know. He wasn't gonna catch. I think maybe he saves one, but no. So anyway, that's the race. So just to kind of break it down, I think here, Drew. This is kind of almost like a microcosm of the entire round. Like Drew just made a lot of not great plays. Jim had some pretty bad luck in certain areas. I felt like Dan had Beck actually, he won the race, but it was kind of like an uneventful race for him. He got out early on lap 1 and basically just let everyone else kind of beat each other up and just kind of stayed out of the way. I think that's sort of like what MR does or tries to do. So, and that's something I've tried to do as well. So, I think I can't knock Beck for his race here. He didn't really there's no highlighting good plays. I feel like Dan actually had more good plays. His usage of reds was really good. His timing on getting items, things like that. I felt like if I would give a player of the race, I'd probably give it to Dan, even though he didn't win. But that's not to take anything away from Beck's performance here. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this race. So yeah, I do have notes on Moo Moo Farm, so we'll see how that goes.